Good evening. I'm Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we're delighted to have our good friend Jeff Abbott back with us. We've had a little bit of a technical glitch here, but we're going to be recording this and uploading it as soon as possible. So Jeff's going to be talking about his brand new book, Traitor's Dance, and we're all excited to see the return of Sam Capra. Jeff has very kindly signed a bunch of books for us. You see there. And I'll go ahead and put links in the comments field. And since we're recording this, there won't be any live questions, but over to you, Barbara.
Oh, thank you very much, Patrick. I have a horrible feeling that it was Microsoft's decision to just invade my laptop to do one of their automatic updates that wrecked us, but here we are. And it's really great to see Jeff. I'm only sorry that he isn't here in person, but we can hope for maybe next year that will happen. So Jeff, thinking about Sam Capra, it's been what, 5 years?
Five or 6 years, yeah.
So a real challenge for you then in writing this story would be how much you think the reader will remember, or how much the reader will know about the earlier, and how much then you need to incorporate into this tale to kind of update everybody.
Well, and it was funny because when I announced that a new Sam was coming back, people were like, can you write a summary? Will there be a summary like, previously on Lost, or Breaking Bad, when it got we've gotten used to that, I think, with television. So I did tell people that anything, they didn't need to remember anything. I would handle updating, all the really pertinent, important information, and not in an expository way, but through, how the characters interact. But it was, I also made the decision, even though it's been 5 to 6 years since we saw Sam in a last book, I advanced him 10 years in his life, because I wanted his young son to be on becoming a teenager and to be a much more active character in the series. And so it was kind of a reboot or a reset in some ways, because I jumped them forward in time. And I didn't try to explain everything that had happened in those intervening years. I just let the reader sort of enter the story. But certainly there are references to things that happened in the earlier books, but I always try to put them in a very understandable context, because our hope is readers who haven't read a Sam Capra book will come to this and get pulled into the Capra-verse, as I call it. Of the continuing characters and the stories that are in the book. So, in the series. But yeah, it was kind of a challenging decision to do that. I thought, am I giving up 10 years of storytelling that I could have done more books from? But then I got very excited about feeling like I was maybe just sort of interrupting their lives, Sam and his son, and they've gotten in these very settled lives. And so, Sam went from being a single dad with a toddler who was normally being cared for by someone else and running his bars around the world and being a spy on the side. And now he's more the suburban dad who's the spy on the side. So that was been kind of fun to sort of change up the energy of the books a little bit that way.
Yeah, well, I found it interesting as a reader, because I didn't remember everything that happened in the earlier Capraverse. And so when the character, like, is it Mila or Mila? Which way do you
Mila.
When Mila comes into the scene, you have to sort of think, now, wait a minute, who is she? What's her history? I agree that it's very interesting that he now has a teenage son that challenges him. He can't just like disappear to his bar and wherever it is without being questioned, right, which he could do before. Right. So inevitably, it seems to me, you set yourself up on a collision course where Sam is going to have to find out. The son, Daniel is going to have to find out what his father does. It's not going to really be possible to run this cover operation of, I just have bars worldwide, so I'm taking off for the Maldives or wherever it may be. And the toddler goes, bye, Dad, or whatever it all is. So you did, create, I thought, a whole new set of problems, not just in being a dad, but in pursuing his dual life.
Well, wouldn't a lot of parents like to have the skills of a CIA agent to deal with their teenagers? I mean, there's almost like things I thought about comedically that could sort of be brought in, like how, how they would have resources to check up on their kid that, mere mortals might not. Using tech not being updated by Microsoft at inopportune moments. But yeah, and I wanted I wanted for Sam to, like, there'll be times, I think, moving forward where he might be tempted to use his spy skills on his kid, but then he's also like, that's my kid, I shouldn't do this. I need to respect their privacy and their personhood and all that. But he's built up, both Sam and the CIA built up a large wall of lies about things that happened years ago, and the agency did this, and this is the truth that Daniel knows or believes about his life, or where he came from, or what happened to him in his early life. And that could very well be a house of cards. So I think that probably inevitably, as the series builds on, there will be a confrontation or a discovery. I've thought about how that might play out, but I kind of want to see where the characters take it. No one could be, actually, the only person who might be nosier than a spy would be a teenager who thinks their parent is up to no good. So I really enjoy writing both characters. I've always loved writing Sam. Writing him and his son together, I've really, really enjoyed. I've been a father to two sons, both of whom are gratefully out of middle school now, but unlike Daniel. But yeah, that sort of duality with Sam having these two lives has been something that has kind of reinvigorated my excitement about continuing the series and writing the series. And I hope a lot of readers will enjoy that new aspect as well.
Well, you then swiped one of my questions,
Oh,
which was,
sorry.
no, it's good.
Go ahead and ask it, and I'll answer it with something new.
Well, I mean, the inevitable question was, having brought him back and started things in a new track, so to speak, are you planning to continue it? Because it'd be kind of heartbreaking for readers to work their way through this and kind of get back into it when it goes away again.
It would be heartbreaking. I mean, and yes, no, I very much want to continue writing Sam. I had a blast writing this book. The previous Sam book was The First Order. And then in between there, I wrote 4 standalone novels set in suburban Austin. Loved writing them. Really enjoy writing psychological suspense. But I felt like there were things I learned in writing those that I could then apply to the new Sam, in terms of sort of the curated life of suburbia, and the parents who are hyper involved in their kids' schools, and people who get start worrying about how successful their kid's going to be. Sam doesn't really quite fit into that world. He was raised all over the world because his parents were relief workers, and so he went everywhere, and now he's in this sort of typical suburban setting. And yeah, I think there's a lot more exploration I can do of him sort of fitting in here. I mean, the kinds of stuff you have to come up with to maintain your cover, when someone is bound and determined to introduce you to her sister who you could date, I mean, it's just, there's lots of things, both sort of a little more wry and both serious, that I think can be explored in more books with Sam. So I'm completely stoked to keep writing another one.
Of course, the question does arise. They don't have to stay in Austin. I mean,
No.
At one point when Sam had childcare arranged and, Daniel was small and all, it made sense. But at this stage, it's possible they could just give up the suburban life and, wander around, particularly since the pandemic. We have so many instances now of, people who are like gypsy workers, or I'm trying to remember, that's not quite the term, but basically people who have decamped and wander the world, working on their laptops, presumably laptops that Microsoft is not rebooting just as you're starting a book event. But I'm going to hold a grudge now because I'm really.
Oh no! Oh no! Yeah,
But
Zoo Towns. Yeah,
but seriously, you could really take him out of Austin if you wanted to and create a whole different, although you like obviously playing with those suburban tropes.
well, yeah, I could. And there are a couple of points in Traitor's Dance where he thinks he could be exposed or he is exposed on his most recent mission. He and Daniel, it will end their lives as they know it in suburban Austin. They'll have to go somewhere else. And certainly, I mean, that's one thing to say to your teenager. We have to move because daddy got transferred. We have to move because daddy was exposed as a secret operative of a high top secret government agency. Sorry, it's it could
Or
be.
how about we have to hide because somebody's trying to kill daddy?
Yes, exactly. Or we have to hide. Sorry, daddy messed up on his mission and now they're hunting us. So yeah, and I think also he has to grapple with, could this work ever endanger his child, his family? And he has to sort of weigh that. Just like lots of people have to weigh what sort of impact their work could have on their family. But yeah, I mean, I feel there's a lot of directions I could go with it. Sam still does own his bars. I had people who were concerned that Sam did not still own his bars. He still does own his bars. So there's always that, he just goes to them on business trips is what he tells Daniel. So, but I did not get rid of the bars. He'll always own the bars, I think. That's just too much fun for research purposes for him not to own the bars. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been wonderful covered, but it also is a source of income. And,
Yes.
I think that in a way that gives Sam a little extra freedom if he were just on the government tit, it would be harder. So I'm remembering now because we did conversations about the 3 best never asked me in last year, An Ambush of Widows, which I thought was a really terrific book. I thought you had a great premise for An Ambush of Widows.
Thank you.
It got a lot of attention. So do you think that writing those standalones changed the way you're writing, Sam?
I think it did. I definitely think it had an influence on it, just to bring in sort of the suburban elements and this idea of people leading these lives that seem very normal, but at the heart of it, there might be a sort of difficult or challenging secret that could sort of undo their happiness. And generally with those books, that's sort of the worst situation that those people are ever finding themselves in. With Sam, every book is a danger. But I think I think because in all those books, I was dealing with parents who were either positive or negative influences. And I think that probably sharpened me or sharpened my thinking about how I was writing Sam when it came to like him actually having to be a parent that I was showing interacting, talking with his child who might start asking questions that Sam didn't want asked or bringing up subjects that Sam still finds painful. So, I wanted it to paint it as a very close relationship between the two of them, but one that could quickly turn barbed or difficult because of secrets being exposed or Sam having to be more honest with him about what he does. And so that's but I think writing the suburban novels, the psychological suspense novels, sort of invested me with more tools and techniques and ways that I could think about Sam and the characters in his world, probably in a way that I hadn't thought about before.
Well, I think it's good for every writer to grow. And there are many writers who've made conscious decisions, to write something else outside a series. Kent Kruger and I talked about that at some length on Monday. I'll never forget, because I've been with him, we did his first ever event. So I've been with Michael Connelly the entire course of his career. And I remember, sitting and talking to him when he wrote for Harry Bosch and then made a decision to write The Poet and do something different. And Kent was pointing out that writing Ordinary Grace changed many things for him in his
Mhm.
Cork O'Connor series, of which we did book 19 on Monday night. So he's doing both. But I also, do you think that readers, you have a hole in this family, Daniel's mother and Sam's wife, and to revisit that all the time would be difficult. But do you expect that readers remember why it is that Sam is the single parent of Daniel?
I don't necessarily expect that they always remember. I've had readers ask about her character many times, and what might happen with her. But I try to lay it out as cleanly and as quickly as I can in the story, so that if you're not familiar, you'll know. If you need a refresher, you'll know. And if you remember, it's not boring, because you're thinking about the emotional stakes of this as well. So that's always a challenge. Those are sometimes the parts you have to go back and rewrite and have discussions with your editor on. Like, I think in the first draft, I was probably referring back to the past, probably too much. And he was like, we can do this more economically, efficiently. And that's really valuable editing, that you can get with that can help you. So that's always the big challenge, is can you bring someone in partway? I mean, you talk about Michael Connelly. I started one of the Bosch series. Well, the Bosch series, I didn't start with the first book. I started more in the middle.
Yeah.
And, I think he's masterful at telling you what you need to know to fill in the history of this character while keeping the character currently fascinating, right? And so, but then you don't necessarily feel lost. You just, if they need to refer to something in the past, they'll refer to it in a way that is very adept and doesn't slow down the story. So.
Very true. I mean, we have to sort of, like with Bob Parker, we have to sort of think about, the Vietnam War, and maybe, so there are things you could skip over. I can certainly tell you from years of experience as an editor that it's very hard for an author to recognize how often they're repeating something.
Yes.
Because when you're writing it, it's stop and go or whatever it is, and you don't see it. When an editor or a first reader or whatever it is reading it, it's fresher in your mind, and you go on page, whatever it is, but he already said that. And, so it's easier to cut back. But let's talk about Marcus Bolt, because, there is a plot to this book that doesn't actually have anything to do with any of this. And I think it's a really interesting idea that you've got for Marcus Bolt. So basically, we have a guy who defected, a sort of American Kim Philby, defected to Russia. It's been ghastly for the people around him and so forth. And now all of a sudden, maybe he wants to come back, but would anybody want him to come back? Why would he come back? The Russians are probably not going to want to let him go. So what's he got to offer? And that's really the conundrum here in this whole book, is Marcus Bolt gone and Marcus Bolt now, Were you inspired by any of the Cambridge Five?
I wasn't thinking so much about the Cambridge Five. I mean, I have read a lot about them and I'm fascinated by them. I was thinking a bit more about, like, Robert Hansen with the FBI who betrayed the country. But what was interesting to me was like you said, well, I named him Bolt because he bolted, and it just seemed to really fit him. But someone who goes away and then someone who comes back, and he vanishes. This is not really a spoiler, but he vanishes. He's been living in Russia. He's remarried. He's kind of treated like the pet of the court of the oligarchs surrounding the Russian leader, who's the same Russian president that we had in the last Sam Capra book. And I kept thinking, what would that life be like? Because I had read for how it was for some of them in Russia is that they were kind of tolerated. They were feted for a bit, and then they were just kind of tucked off in the corner and tried to make
the use had been wrung out of them.
Right.
It wasn't like they were continuously feeding back information.
Yeah.
So once they defected to all intents and purposes, their use to Russia was over.
Exactly. And, you know, there's a point where Bolt's Russian wife brags, oh, they still consult with him. Like, no, they're real. Are they really, or are they not? They're probably not, you know, picking up. They're not coming to him with stuff. Now, he might be gathering stuff on his own because once a spy, always a spy. But to me, when I thought of what if you had someone like that try to come back, it opened up so many big dramatic questions that I got a little obsessed with the idea of it and all the different paths that it could sort of take. And, you know, he loved being the center of attention once he was, and then he wasn't the center of attention anymore. And then now he's the center of attention in a really negative way because the Russians want to bring him back or eliminate him. And the Americans want to find him or eliminate him. And they all sort of have this vision of this happening sort of behind the curtain and not coming onto the public's awareness of it. So it was interesting for me as a writer to think about him, to think about his new life that he had established in Russia and how that might have changed him. But then to think about the family that he left behind and the people he left behind and the wreckage he left behind. And so I thought someone who may have to deal with that kind of accounting, I'm kind of interested to read, to think about them and read about them.
Well,
but I do find Kim Philby and the others fascinating. That there were
well,
five of them all at once is what's astonishing to me.
Not entirely all at once, but I mean, they were all active all at once, but outed bit by bit. I think, there's a real difference, Jeff, between ideologues. People who defected because, of some ideological persuasion. And there were plenty of people who acted for Russia during the Cold War or before and so forth out of some, kind of like conversion to communism or, was an ideological thing. But then there are people, who defect because maybe their life's blown up and it's an easy escape route. Maybe they just do it for the money. Maybe, they're attention seeking, and instead of becoming shooters in the mall downtown, they decide to, do it the other way. That this recent couple, the Navy guy and his wife, they were purely in it for the money.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a price tag. We want and I always wonder how people like that think they're really going to get away with it. Because the money trail is a lot easier to follow than the ideology trail.
Yes. And the money trail is always going to trip you up. And there were also, I'm thinking about people who felt disrespected, like they had expertise or they had sort of this inflated view of themselves. And it's almost like, well, I'll prove everyone wrong. I'll show how smart I am and I'll outwit you all. And I think that was a little bit of what happened with Robert Hansen. The FBI agent who passed secrets to the Russians, like that feeling disrespected, that feeling like not appreciated. I'll show you. And it's just so schoolyard is what kills me, that these are grown adults with families, with responsibilities, with oaths that they have taken, and they'll throw it away over something like that. It's to writers, it's fascinating. It's sort of tragic just to see the wreckage of the life that they make, but
there's a self-centeredness that is really hard to imagine, because you're right, the wreckage that they leave behind. But what's interesting, I think, about your Marcus Bolt situation is if in fact he is going to leave Russia and has some ticket to return, which we don't know for sure, he's going to create wreckage for the Russian people in his new life. The guy that handled him, he's going to be, flayed alive. He has remarried a woman who was pretty glamorous. And, they've been married a long time. They have a child, right?
They do not. She has a stepson.
Oh, it's a stepson.
She has a stepson from an earlier.
You're right. That's it. But anyway, there is a, a family. There's a wife and there's a stepchild and whatever. And so he's turning around now and he's putting a whole new group of people at risk.
He's
chaos. And we don't know this, assuming that this is really what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
Because, it isn't at all clear as we read through it, what it is that he's trying to do, what his motivation might be.
Right.
And ultimately, does he have something so worthwhile that he can go home again? Or because, if you're a defected spy, can you ever go home again?
Well, hence the dramatic question of the book.
Yes.
That was what
Which we're not going to answer in this discussion. But I did think
Yeah,
that,
no, it's, I mean, that is the rhetorical question I wrestled with a whole lot during this to figure out, okay, if he's done this, why would he do it? What would be his ticket back home?
right.
If he's not, what kind of deception could this be? And why would that be? But, we're following people who are all hunting for him. And they're grappling with the question. I'm not showing him grappling with the question. I'm showing them grappling with the question because they're all asking the same even regardless of the reason that they're hunting him to eliminate him, to capture him, to see what he has for revenge, whatever it could be. So it was fun to write about. He's very popular when you think about it. Everyone wants to be with him. And meet back up with him so they can deal with him. But yeah,
I don't think they want to be with him. I think everybody is concerned about the fallout.
I'm joking about the be with him. They want to be with him, possibly
but
throttle him.
not entirely, because I think his Russian wife actually is fond of him.
Yes,
So emotionally, I think the person who cares the most about him is in fact his Russian wife. And so, she has, I mean, one of the big questions that keeps coming up with, like, the superheroes and so forth. I've talked about this question with a number of authors lately. Superman can't reveal that he's Clark Kent because, once they find out he's mild-mannered Clark Kent, reporter, then all the people around him are in danger. And it's the same kind of a thing, here. He's not a superhero, but inevitably what happens is that everybody around him, there's fallout, there's repercussions, there's consequences, danger for the people around him. And, that's an interesting psychological question, whether somebody like that cares at all, or whether that's part of the attention getting thing. I mean, maybe it's like us trying to understand some of these serial shooters and so forth, or, the guy that, stabs Rushdie, or what is it, that really motivates them? Is it truly a mission, or are they people who are desperate for attention, desperate for like a moment of fame, especially in this internet world or whatever it is, social media world, where, are people really willing to pay an ultimate price to have 10 minutes of notoriety? And why does the media give it to them?
Yeah. Well, I think with Marcus, it was a lot of different things. I remember there's one point in the book, again, trying not to give away too much, but, did he do it for money? Well, he paid off his wife's gambling debts with it, but not him. Right? Like, he did a kindness for it. So who is this guy? Right. And, I think there are patterns in his behavior that sort of get revealed in the in the course of the story. I think with him, there's a kind of power that he holds in holding information that could affect people's lives. And he derives a sense of power and superiority from doing that, regardless of which side that he's doing it to. So I think, it would have been interesting to maybe delve deeper into his childhood and see how did that get started? That sort of, seemingly compulsive need. But, there's one point I think he tries to suggest to Sam they're two sides of the same coin. And Sam is like, no, we're not. We're not. But, that's often what you feel with the villain hero dynamic. And I certainly have written that before, but in this case, Sam is like, no. So
Right. Well, you know, you're trying to do, I mean, it's a 432-page advanced reading copy as it is. So that's somewhat, not a huge longer, but I mean, it's a heftier thriller than some. And there's only so much space in the story that, you know, gives you room to, you really can't delve that deeply
Right.
into his childhood and that. And also, you know, Karen Slaughter and I talked about this last night. I mean, one of the reasons we call book thrillers is pacing. There are a lot of other reasons. And it's become a very blurred, I think, set of why we differentiate a thriller from, let's say, a police investigation or something. But I do think that Karen is correct that people expect a thriller to move faster than, let's say, you know, a private eye story or certainly a cozy or something. So that means there's only so much you can do if you want to keep the action moving in terms of exploring character. But I really thought Marcus Bolt was fascinating. And, you know, what kind of feedback have you had from readers so far about him?
Well, the book's only been out for a day, so
I know.
I have not heard that much yet so far on the Marcus front. I will be really curious to hear what people think. I have heard from people who say, I just started it today and I'm already completely pulled in and I'm 200 pages in. And so, you know, that's what you hope to hear. But I think it's always important to give your protagonist a really interesting antagonist. There's lots of different ways you can make them interesting or fascinating without celebrating that they're bad. But, you know, that's what I tried to do with this, was just to make him a person who would, what is the line? You had my interest, but now you have my attention. That sort of feels like maybe the unfolding dynamic between them. Because Sam is initially given a somewhat quiet assignment to just observe Bolt's daughter and see if Bolt heads to her. And then, of course, his just mere presence there tips him off to other things. And it's, you know, just becomes sort of explodes into what could be a family drama into more of the international intrigue. But Bolt was interesting to write. And so I was glad I got to write about him.
Well, you said, you know, you're absolutely right that the two pillars of any thriller are the protagonist and the antagonist. And you do the most memorable thrillers may be memorable for the antagonist more. I mean, when we think Silence of the Lambs, we don't really think, you know, we think Hannibal Lecter, right? Mm-hmm. Not Clarice Starling. And so, yeah, if you've crafted a great antagonist here, because basically all, you know, thrillers are more or less a contest. You usually know who the bad guy is from the start, unless it's maybe a serial killer book or something. And it's about who's going to win, you know, who's going to win what. And what's interesting in this book, I think, is that there are multiple stakes. You know, this isn't like a treasure hunt where either one guy gets to the pirate gold before the other guy. And, you know, that's a pretty clear cut kind of a contest. But this is a different one. The stakes are human. Yep. And it's hard to define a clear winner in a story like this too, you know. But anyway, I thought you did a remarkable job, and it'll be fun to see. Much. Well, it's my pleasure. I've missed Sam, like many fans, although I really did enjoy your standalones, you know, and I wondered if you had decided, you know, to just set Sam aside.
No, I think I kept having ideas for standalones, and I feel sometimes my publisher liked me doing standalones because it can bring in new readers. Right. But then they were also, when I said, okay, I think I've had an idea for the next Sam, they were eager, you know, and said, let's do another Sam. So especially when I talked about accelerating him into 10 years forward, and giving him sort of this new for him setting, sure, that would open up new dramatic questions for him. So I appreciated their support.
Well, you know, I think a mix is a good thing. A long running series, you don't ever want it to drag. And, you know, I think it's a shame to give it up. because, you know, it has its readers, and, you know, it establishes an identity. But I also think it's fun because once you have a long series going, you can't undo a lot of things. And so you get ideas that simply don't fit the characters that you've established or the events that have transpired. And so, you know, it's nice for readers, I think, to, you know, take a break along with you. So unfortunately, we are not able, since this is not a live discussion, thank you again, Microsoft, we're not able to get any reader feedback. So I apologize for that, but is there anything you'd like to say to readers as we exit?
Just want to say thank you all for picking up my books, for reading them, whether a standalone or a Sam novel. It's a privilege to write for you. I don't ever take it for granted that I have the chance to tell you stories. And I really hope that you'll enjoy Traitor's Dance. I had a blast writing it, and I hope you'll have a blast reading it. And thank you, Barbara, for everything you do every day for authors. Every single day you do something special for authors. So thank you to you and Patrick and everyone at the bookstore, because y'all are just amazing.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to remind you that Jeff very kindly did sign our copies of Traitor's Dance. They are currently at the store. It's only day 2. So you have a chance to grab one and read it before somebody puts spoilers up. You know, you have to guard against that. My advice to people when a book is brand new is to try to stay off reading other people's reviews and so forth, because you can't trust them. And in a book like this, spoilers would be all too easy. Anyway, it's lovely to see you. Let's hope that you can come visit us next year, which would be really delightful. So good night, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Good night.
Bye. Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.